Welcome in everybody to the fourth video in my 2024 Rookie Prospect Profile series. Today we're taking a look at my Rookie 104 in one quarterback leagues and 1.07 in Superflex leagues, and that's Georgia tight end Brock Bowers, who I don't think it's hyperbole to call the greatest tight end prospect of all time. Yes, even better than Kyle Pitts was a couple years ago. Taking a look at Bowers' college career, he joined Georgia in 2021 and immediately became the focal point of the Bulldogs offense, hauling in 56 passes for nearly 900 yards and 13 touchdowns, asserting himself as essentially the wide receiver one for Georgia over Ladd McConkey and Adonai Mitchell. And fun fact, Bowers' freshman season is the #1 season in total fantasy points by a tight end since 2010. So quite literally the best college tight end season in recent history as a freshman. But then in 2022, Bowers just built upon his insane freshman season with over 900 yards and 7 touchdowns on 63 receptions. And he also rushed for over 100 yards and scored 3 additional rushing touchdowns in that season. So once again, Brock Bowers was a major part of Georgia's offense. And while his freshman season was the #1 season in fantasy points by a tight end since 2010, his sophomore season in 2022 was #2 on that list. And then last season, 2023, Bowers only played in 10 games while dealing with an ankle injury throughout the season, but he still managed to be Georgia's top option statistically with over 700 yards and 6 touchdowns on 56 receptions. Now, this season actually ranks 9th since 2010 in total fantasy points by tight ends, but from a point per game perspective, it actually beats out his freshman and sophomore season, as Bowers was on a 15-game pace of almost 1,100 yards and 9 touchdowns on 84 receptions in 2023. This is what I mean when I say that Brock Bowers is quite literally the best tight end prospect of all time. Now for the analytics, I don't have a marker system for tight ends like I do running backs and wide receivers, but Jax Falcone at Dino Game Theory on Twitter posted a thread recently called The Anatomy of an Elite Dynasty Tight End, which ultimately ends up with 8 data points that make up elite tight ends, and guess what? Brock Bowers hits on almost every single one of these. The production metrics are off the charts. He averaged over 2.6 yards per route run with a best season of over 3 yards per route run. He averaged 8.5 yards after catch per reception over his career, 14.5 yards per reception over his career. He averaged 0.12 first downs per route run, which is just insane for a tight end. And even though he didn't run at the NFL Combine, he is definitely a sub 4.6 runner, as he was reportedly clocked at 4.5 coming out of high school. The only things that he doesn't hit on from this list is being 6'4" or over 245 pounds. But he is literally 6'3", 243. That's like saying that Jahmyr Gibbs isn't going to succeed at the NFL level because he's not 200 pounds. He weighed in at 199. Bowers is the same size as Sam Laporta and an inch smaller than Dalton Kincaid, George Kittle, and David Njoku. And he's the same height but 10 pounds heavier than Evan Ingram. His size literally does not matter at all, and actually one could argue that he is more of the perfect size for a fantasy football tight end, especially when you just watch the film. It is so obvious that Bowers is immensely talented. He has incredible acceleration and burst for his size off the line of scrimmage. He is a very good route runner, and if you're lining him up either in line or in the slot, he can beat any linebacker or even slot cornerback that's lined up against him and instantly create a mismatch for your offense. And then once he has the ball in his hands, he can do some incredible damage after the catch. That's why he has a higher yards after catch per reception number over his career than a bunch of receivers in this class, including Marvin Harrison, Malik Neighbors, Rome Odunze, Troy Franklin, and a bunch of other wide receivers. Brock Bowers is better than all of them at yards after the catch. It is also why Georgia was giving this dude end arounds and rush attempts, because he is a freak of nature and a dangerous weapon with the ball in his hands. I think the only skill set in his arsenal that is not labeled as strong is his run blocking, which he is not bad at, and he does show some potential with it, but it is just something of note for his complete overall profile. For fantasy though, that won't be an issue, because when he's out there, he is out there to catch the ball, which is all we care about for fantasy football. So then the final piece of this puzzle is just landing spot, which I do think this is something that most people haven't fully considered when locking themselves into Brock Bowers in rookie drafts at 104 in one quarterback or 107 in Superflex. I do honestly think there is a world, and a relatively realistic world, where Brock Bowers does lose some value after the NFL draft because of his landing spot. Right now, of the realistic teams that could draft him in the top 10, the best options are either the Chargers at 5 or the Jets at 10. And I honestly don't even think the Chargers are that realistic because I imagine they look at Marvin Harrison or Malik Neighbors over Brock Bowers as one of them is most likely going to be there at 5. The Giants also do kind of work too at 6, especially with the news that Darren Waller might retire, but I just don't see them focusing on tight end at 6 overall when they have so many other needs to address. If you're looking at Tennessee, I think that would be a little bit rough to start with DeAndre Hopkins and now Calvin Ridley there. Atlanta already has Kyle Pitts and also Drake London. Chicago has DJ Moore and now Keenan Allen, plus Cole Kmet is a more than fine capable player at that position as well. Then we get outside the top 10. Minnesota already has TJ Hawkinson. Denver needs a bunch of other stuff too, just like the New York Giants. Vegas drafted Michael Mayer last year in the second round, also has Devontae Adams and Jacoby Myers. New Orleans, I think, would work. Indy could work as well too. Cincy could work if T. Higgins isn't there long term. And then we're outside of the top 12 now, which I strongly doubt that he falls that far. So out of all the teams in the top 20 that could draft him, I think only 5 teams total, and even or realistically, 3 teams total really work for him to have an immediate impact for fantasy football. It's not to say that he won't ever become an elite tight end if he landed in Tennessee or Chicago or Seattle or something like that, but the immediate production might not be there to make him a top 5 fantasy tight end for a year or two, depending on where he goes. And I think that that's something that's not really being considered with Brock Bowers' profile right now. Now, this doesn't change the way that I view him long-term for Dynasty. He is still very much a top 5 Dynasty tight end, but I do think that for some teams out there, it might make sense to try to move him before the NFL draft. If you are competing or you're trying to look to compete in 2024, I would be trying to pivot off of Brock Bowers for a Sam Laporta or a Trey McBride, possibly even a Mark Andrews plus if you can do that too, because at least with Laporta and McBride, for example, you're getting a very young, very elite asset in a known situation with known elite production in that situation. You're not losing anything, and honestly, you might be gaining some added stability just in case Brock Bowers goes the way of Kyle Pitts or Evan Ingram or Eric Ebron. But if you are not competing or you already have a top tight end or someone, then take Brock Bowers for the immense upside that he does possess. Even if you got to wait a year or two for that upside to be realized, it is very, very well worth it, especially if you are rebuilding, because Brock Bowers might really be the most dangerous weapon in this entire 2024 draft class.